Okay, 3, 2, 1, let's jam. Cowboy Bebop was released in the year of 1998, and when the series came to a close, people loved it, calling it one of their favorite pieces of media of all time. You know how Metroid and Castlevania created the genre of games called Metroidvania? Well, Cowboy Bebop created an entire genre as well, mixing sci-fi elements with a noir type setting, which on paper sounds horrible but is executed perfectly. And I could go on and on about how the show makes you care for the characters, or how I'm definitely going to carry that weight. However, none of this would be what it is if it were not for one aspect of the show. That aspect being the style of Cowboy Bebop. Cowboy Bebop, as stated before, mixes sci-fi elements with a noir type setting, and in the very first episode of the series, we understand how this show is going to play out. The very first scene of the show is our main character up against the wall of a church, proceeding to get lung cancer, while flashbacks play of the man in a gunfight, ending with him having his own blood run down his face. However, the way this is shown to the audience is incredibly effective. The color palette is almost entirely blue, giving it a 90s yet mature look to the atmosphere. And those aforementioned flashbacks are split up into 2-second portions throughout the scene, giving the viewer a sense of curiosity. In the next scene, we see them later on in life. That one dude's name is Spike and his friend is named Jed, and they're bounty hunters in the year 2071, and they really do nothing except try to make a quick buck by beating up criminals and then turning them in. And one thing I find interesting about the show's setting is that most shows and movies either picture the future as a utopia or a dystopia. However, Bebop does neither, instead taking what we are already familiar with and putting a small twist on it. For instance, cars are still cool in this universe, however, spaceships are more convenient. Ashtrays exist, but now they are more mechanical. Anyways, a bunch of shenanigans go down, they find a dude who's doing using the red eye, and then Spike and the criminal have a brawl in the streets. Now, if you were like me, or literally any other person watching this, you were expecting this to be flashy, filled with color, and electric with energy. Instead, we get this. This isn't what I wanted, this is mockery! You know how in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, the frames drop from time to time to make it feel like a comic book? Well, here it's really the same thing. The animation is incredibly chopped up, however the entire fight still looks incredibly smooth, and instead of being vivid with colors and electric with energy, it's actually very mundane, dry, and human looking. The first episode of Cowboy Bebop does exactly what every pilot should do. Introduce the concept, introduce the plot, and introduce the characters. However, what I find remarkable is how they make the show change styles while still being consistent. Throughout the next 4 episodes, we would be introduced to 2 other characters, Ein the dog and Faye Valentine, 2 characters who are loved endlessly to this day. And later in episode 9, we get introduced to Ed, a young tech genius that's really just along for the ride, providing most of the comical relief of the series. However, even when nothing's going on, when these characters have absolutely nothing to do, the show gives these characters personality just by their eyes or even their posture. Spike seems relaxed, but also a bit uneasy. Jed is upright and firm, yet also seems uncomfortable when people ask him questions about his past. And Faye seems confident and independent, but also has a hint of loneliness and desperation to her. And all of this is detailed just by their respective motions and posture alone. However, Cowboy Bebop wouldn't be Cowboy Bebop if it were not for the soundtrack. Heavily jazz related, it creates an upbeat and lo-fi kind of feel that's really unique to this show. There is a reason why the words 3, 2, 1, let's jam sticks with people. But of course, we can't talk style without talking about Vicious. I mean, look at that coat, man. This is the coat of someone who's got their life together. You remember that fun and upbeat feeling of Bebop that I was talking about? Well, every time Vicious is on screen, that upbeat kind of feel dies immediately. Being the major antagonist of this series, he does his job well. He's ruthless, he's merciless, and will not stop until he gets what he wants. Vicious is not really treated as a character though, but more like a force of nature, having little personality whatsoever and having the least amount of screen time than the entire cast of Bebop. but being the most dangerous and brutal character in the whole series. But he's also a perfect antagonist simply because he throws all the charming qualities about the show before right out of the window. Every time the man is in action, the music is non-existent, the environment is dry, the colors are more mundane than ever, and the humor is as dead as my upload schedule. And as contrary to the show's previous style as it is, it still works just as well, if not better. Some of the best moments of the show is when Vicious is in the center of the plot, our protagonist Spike having known the man to some degree, which somehow sparked a bitter hatred between the two. A hatred that you don't necessarily understand until their first encounter in episode 5, Ballad of Fallen Angels, where a shootout sparks in the middle of a church, ending with only Spike and Vicious standing. And the way they attack each other is brutal, not caring about their own well-being, focused on having blood drip from the person in front of them. I could talk about this show for hours, I really could. I could talk more in depth about the characters, I could talk about how good the dub is, I could discuss spoilers, but I digress. However, when it comes down to it, Cowboy Bebop got on the map for its style, and I would say at least slightly why it is still revisited today. Cowboy Bebop is slick and fused multiple genres together so well that it became its own genre. And in my opinion, that is absolutely remarkable.